So what are the biggest challenges you either have seen, you see today, or you foresee by trying to make us evolve toward a more sustainable eating habits, right? And maybe I start with Paul, because Amy has been growing for quite some time. How do you, which challenges do you see into, like when organic was, nobody knew about organic, right? How did you start changing mindset?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think we probably have a lot of perspectives on it. I think first and foremost, there will be challenges and you have to just stay true to your vision and who you are. I think we had many opportunities to grow our business faster if we had just decided not to be organic. I don't think many people know until recently we're even a vegetarian food company, and we had plenty of customers knocking on our door saying, "Hey, if you make a meat-based option, you don't have to call Amy's." And despite that, we just had to stay true to who we are. And I think that's first and foremost, you end up getting rewarded that over the long run. But I think it's just important. You can't chase every moment, and to some degree, when it comes to values, you have to be consistent. And but I did want to speak specifically to the plant-based challenges, because those have really radically changed in recent years. I think for many years, Amy's was almost hesitant or almost shy to describe ourselves as a vegetarian food company, even though I think today we're one of the larger certainly one of the largest vegetarian meal companies in the country. And a lot of that was the stigma kind of associated with it. There was this idea for many years, and I grew up as a vegetarian. So I'm part of that tribe. That was my identity. That's how I've always eaten. That's how my parents raised me. So I can speak a bit candidly of it because I've been in it, but I also understand most of my friends are not vegetarian or vegans. And for many years and for a long time, there was a bit of a stigma or almost an identity around that. And you either were that and you were proud about it and you tried to convert everybody else to it, or you weren't that. And I think the big shift that we've seen is this whole evolution of even this word plant-based diets or plant-based foods, which I think we've really seen open up that tent. And, again, I think we all have our own personal views of maybe where we ought to be as a society and as individuals. But I think from a business perspective, at least, that has given this sort of permission for a lot more people to kind of entertain eating some vegetarian or vegan food, trying it. And I think what we really find is that actually most people are much less intimidated by it once they start than when they think, it's this thing I can't live without. And, we certainly feel that kind of permission to come in through even verbiage and not making it necessarily an identity, but more of a sort of something to try. Things like Meatless Monday for us have been very effective because they lower that kind of entry point. And I think the last thing I'll just sort of say on the plant-based, which is that, we just, it still has to taste great and meet the moment, and I think that's one thing we've really learned for Amy is that, if a meal is not satisfying, if you don't feel, full afterwards, if you don't enjoy it, people are only going to stick with it for so long. And so to really, keep people on this journey, you can get them to try it once or twice, but to keep that consistency, you still really have to pay attention to the whole experience. No matter how much you sell the environmental benefits, no matter how much you sell the organic benefits, there's a small group who might, like my mother, for example, the stuff she, fed us as children, she was this absolute purest natural food. I don't think I tasted chocolate till I was 18 kind of kid, so there are people who will sacrifice all of that, but most of the world won't. And I think we just have to be comfortable with that. And that's personally how I think we can grow kind of this plant-based foods movement to a much larger degree, getting every American to drop meat 1 or 2 meals, a week will have an enormous impact on climate change, on water systems, on you name it. Getting 1% more of Americans that choose vegan is also impactful, but I think is actually maybe a harder call to action quicker. So that's one way we've kind of approached it. And I think lastly, it's so wonderful to finally see the environmental community kind of accepting and understanding plant-based foods as a meaningful solution. I think Project Drawdown now calls it the number 4 solution. I think some of that UN work that showed something like 18% of global climate change is linked to animal proteins and the deforestation and other, secondary effects around it. So
as well as pollution,
oh yeah, exactly. So it's really evolved from when we started. It was fully about animal rights. It was a lot, Geoff, kind of what you spoke to, that sort of intrinsic philosophical idea that we as humans don't need to eat an animal to survive. And while I think we believe that, we now see all these other, from health outcomes to planetary outcomes associated with this. And it's only, again, making it easier to invite people into this movement. So, yeah.
So Geoff, do you, like, I'm thinking, you know, you have a fascinating story, right? When I think about sports supplement and nutrition, there's so many products out there that are not necessarily healthy or have the right science. And you went to, so I'm sure not only like you fight like in a plant-based movement, but even in a sport nutrition, I can just imagine some of the challenges you faced, right?
Yeah, and you know, obviously the sports nutrition arena is dominated by men, and being a vegan male, you know, there's that whole thing that eating meat is masculine, and I think, you know, there's a lot more women who have become vegetarian. The statistics bear that out, and vegan as well, globally, especially if it's heart centered or motion based or ethical based, and for me. I know that, and I don't mean to stereotype, but a lot of men are more intellectual, and come to where they make their choices from an intellectual place. So, you know, using my background in science and research, I'm so glad there's actually now some science. Back in 1985, there was nothing. It was all extrapolation. You know, I had to say, well, see the study, if you just did this, this is what the mechanisms that are going on in it. Now we actually have real data looking at the difference between vegans and vegetarians and omnivores, and we can actually see the different physiological effects that that's having on our health. But the biggest thing, obviously, any vegan gets, the very first question is, where do you get your protein? And for me, it's so ironic that that's the question, when the answer, the truthful, only honest answer, is that all essential amino acids that make up protein only come from one source on the planet, and that's plants. They make them by taking nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and forming glucose, and then forming, through photosynthesis, form amino acids. All the essential amino acids are made by plants. Animals can't make them. It is impossible. That's why we call them essential amino acids, because we have to get them from food. All animals, humans and all other animals, have to eat some sort of plants. Okay, carnivorous animals eat an animal that probably ate the plants, but it always originated in plants. All protein originates in plants. Some bacteria can make their own protein, but there's exceptions to the rule in the whole biological kingdom. But you know, that's if you can just start there. And when you look at all of the nutrition, almost all of the antioxidants, almost all the vitamins and minerals, except for B12, which comes from bacteria, and D3, which comes from sun, all of them are created by plants. All of the fiber created by plants. You know, even the air we breathe, created by plants. Animals make carbon dioxide, which the plants use. It's an equal exchange, you know. We breathe their waste product, they breathe ours, you know. Everything we need comes from plants. So I ask people, like, what is it you think you're getting nutritionally by eating an animal product? You are basically taking all of this plant nutrition, feeding it to an animal, killing it, and then taking those plant nutrients. That's like turning to your friend and killing them and taking all the money that they've earned. Is that right? No, and it's the exact same equation. Go out and make your own money, right? Don't kill somebody and take their money, and go out and eat your own plant nutrients. Don't feed them to an animal and then kill it just to take its plant nutrients. That makes absolutely no sense at all. So, you know, you have to ask yourself, if none of the nutrients originate in animals, why are we involving them? Over 1 trillion animals are killed every year for food production, and over 1/3 of those never even get eaten. They're lost in food waste. So you're talking over 300 million animals dying, suffering, being imprisoned, being tortured, and killed for no reason whatsoever. That's more than the population of the entire United States. We're doing that every single year to the animals. This is horrific. This is the greatest holocaust of any living creatures this planet has ever experienced. Over 1 trillion fish killed each year. I mean, this is just insane. And nutritionally, there's no reason for it.
And I think, you know, we're getting back some of this behavior because most of the inflammation that we see at the microbiome gut level is coming from animal meat. And to me, it's interesting because you mentioned how do you get evolved, you try evolving people. I think the interesting things that happen with athletes, and you know way more than me, but what I've noticed is when they start publishing that plant-based diet where yielding to higher performance, you start seeing more and more athletes going that way. Like you could talk to a lot about science or about ecological impact or what's the responsible things to do. But the moment it was about performance,
Yes.
you know, a lot of my friends, like they were triathlete or endurance athlete, they start looking into that because it was about performance. So it was interesting, right? As far as what's motivating people to change.
Yeah, and I think definitely for pro athletes, they get paid based on their performance. If they can recover faster, that means they're playing more or engaged more in their sport. They can make more money. They can perform at a higher level. So they have a financial and a career incentive to make the change. And we're seeing that a lot right now. So that's exciting. And movies like Game Changers, if you haven't seen it, it's a fantastic film that really tries to tackle that head on. That we put together and sponsored the very first 100% vegan bodybuilding championship in the world. So we had over 50 natural vegan bodybuilders compete. I am a natural bodybuilding and natural physique champion myself, and that's 57 years of age and 35 years vegan. So I really want to break that stereotype that, you know, consuming whey or consuming meat is more masculine. It's not. If you've seen the Game Changers, there's a funny piece in there to show you exactly why it's not masculine, because the elements that are in the animal foods actually clog the arteries to the genitals, leading to erectile dysfunction. So not very masculine at all. And they actually show that in the film. You can actually they measure it by measuring the erections during night, nocturnal erections. And they go down dramatically just from eating one animal-based meal.
Well, thank you, Geoff. I think I would think with COVID-19, as more and more people are gardening, is it like, which challenges do you see in convincing people? Do you see people more and more interested in gardening, or what type of behaviors are you currently seeing when you're promoting your solution?
Absolutely. Now I feel I want to flex in the middle of my answer, and it's not going to be as impressive. I'm sorry ahead of time. Yeah, I mean there are very few barriers into convincing people to grow their own food. I mean the market has doubled. The lawn and garden market has doubled in the last 10 years. Before COVID, it was at a $52 billion all-time high lawn and gardening activity. 80% of new gardeners between the ages of 18 and 34. Right. A lot of folks probably around the ages of some folks around here. COVID has only amplified that, as like the cottage core movement has been, ever stronger. And so for us, it's just more been a matter of getting out in front of the conversation so people know what we're doing. In terms of barriers to being plant-based generally, we are not explicitly sort of like vegan or vegetarian. But we are in the business of showing people the magic and wonder and awesomeness of growing herbs and growing your own food. And that includes the manifold uses of those things. And so, one of my favorite things we've ever shared out is like the eggplant donut recipe. And it's just like, what? Like you can do that with an eggplant? It's amazing. I regularly will challenge my own social channels and be like, hey, celery's bad. Can, prove me wrong? And they will. And so it's, I feel like for us, it's more about, how do we make the idea of growing your own food not feel like necessarily, we're a public benefit corporation. I should say that from the start. Like our three public benefits are sustainability, public health, and food justice. And so we bake we are very impact minded at the very core level, but our approach is, we have to make sure that, growing vegetables doesn't feel like you have to eat your vegetables. You know what I mean? And so we're very much about like, how do you make it easy? How do you make it easy to start? How do you make it cool and sexy to do, right? Like you have like all of these amazing different kinds of basil, right? You have all these amazing different kinds of mint, and when you start to expose people kind of secretly, kind of without even them knowing that that's what you're doing, exposing them to sort of this vast world that they just haven't seen before, they start to get very curious. And they start to enjoy those things. And, you know, I did a time tasting with friends 2 months ago as a kind of a pilot test for something we want to do later. It's like 5 kinds of thyme. And it's this really fantastic experience. And so what we know from the data, right, is that when you start growing your own food, you are more likely to eat vegetables and eat healthier. And you're also more likely to enjoy it, right? Plenty of studies around this, particularly in the educational environments. And so if we can leverage the tools of the private sector and the marketing of the private sector to be able to bring more people into the fold at that very first stage, then we have a lot of confidence that all of these things that we want to happen, people becoming more conscious of sustainability, more conscious of what they eat, more conscious of their place in the environment, right? Then we think that's going to lead to a lot of these really fantastic downstream benefits that we're doing our best to measure, but in many ways, difficult to measure. But yeah, as far as getting people to be interested in growing their own food, really the biggest barriers are, I'm afraid I'm going to kill it. So we have a program as part of being a member is that if your plant dies for any reason in the first season, we'll replace it, right? And then hey, I'm scared I'm going to kill it because I don't have any support. So the biggest part of what we do is post-purchase support. So the barriers that are there, we attack them head on in our offering.
Thank you, Roman. So I think that leads me